Hi, it's time to make English muffins. This portion of a recipe from our breakfast baking kit is great because a lot of people don't make English muffins at home. It's kind of a cool recipe to have in your repertoire of things that you like to make. And so we're gonna have a blast today making up some English muffins. This dough is a little bit different than like pizza dough or donut dough or bagel dough. And that we're gonna combine the mixture a little bit differently as far as how we incorporate the flour, so it's kind of a fun new technique. The first thing we're gonna do though is we're going to work with our liquids. And so what I've got here is I've got a half a cup of very warm hot milk. I heated this up in the microwave about 30 seconds at a time until it started to bubble on the edges. That's gonna make sure that this milk is hot enough to dissolve my sugar. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna dump the sugar into my milk mixture here and just stir that up and get that going so that that sugar can dissolve inside of there. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my yeast to a half a cup of very hot water. So it's not hot, like boiling hot. Actually, you don't want it to be boiling hot because then it would be too hot for the yeast. But I just took and ran some hot water from the sink until I put my hand under it and it felt really hot. And then I'm like, where you kind of stick it in and you're like, oh, it's too hot to wash your hands. That is how hot you want your water to be. And we're gonna take and we're going to activate this dry, active yeast in our warm water here. And I'm gonna give that a gentle little stir too, to kind of help dissolve that yeast into that mixture and stir that up. Now, the reason we're doing this separately is for a couple different reasons. One, if your milk is too hot, if you got it kind of to boiling or scalding point, we don't want to add that to the yeast right away, just in case it's too hot and it would kill off the yeast when you're making your dough. So we're going to stir that up a little bit. I'm going to go back and stir up the milk here a little bit too. And then what we also have here is I have 2 tablespoons of melted shortening and a big glass bowl that we're gonna start to make our dough into. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of make a swimming pool of all of this wet stuff that our flour can stir up and we're gonna combine in there. And so I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add in our milk and sugar mixture. If there is any extra little bits of sugar that have not quite dissolved, I'm gonna just take a spatula or my wooden spoon and stir those in there and get those going. All right. And then to that mixture, I'm gonna add in our yeast and water and stir that in there as well. Kind of smells like cereal milk right now. And then I'm gonna swirl in and stir in our shortening. And this is gonna evenly distribute that fat throughout the mixture, our shortening throughout the mixture there. Okay. Now I measured out our 3 total cups of flour that this recipe is gonna need. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start incorporating, I'm probably gonna put 2 cups of flour here in to begin with. And we're gonna stir those 2 cups of flour up until it is nice and smooth. And then we're gonna work in that last cup of flour. And so that's a little bit different than most dough recipes where they would have you add the liquid into the dry. We're actually adding the dry into the liquid to get started with. And so this is gonna be a really, really sticky, goopy kind of dough here. And mix that in until it's nice and smooth. Use a little arm work here. All right, so I'm gonna show you here, that is our wet sticky dough, nice and smooth. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and I'm just gonna sprinkle about 90% of the flour that's left on top here, and then I'm gonna work that into the dough as well. All right, and you can also use a spatula for this. I like a wooden spoon. I don't know, it's like one of my favorite tools. I love the wooden spoon. But a spatula would also work for this too. Okay, and then I'm gonna use my finger and I'm gonna scrape off the extra bit here, grab that little bit that I left on the counter with my spoon, and then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add that last little bit of flour over the top. And we're actually gonna let this particular dough rise right into the bowl here today. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my hand, I'm kind of making like a little scoop, and I'm going down to the bottom of the bowl, and I'm just kind of pressing it and flipping the dough on top of itself as I go. And what that's allowing to do is it's kind of picking up the dough, the flour that's in the bottom of that bowl, and incorporating it into the dough mixture also. And when I get this dough to kind of come together then, we're gonna take this nice soft dough and we're gonna cover it with a little bit of plastic wrap and we're gonna let it rise until it doubles in size. And so that's gonna take a minute. And so when we come back, Now that I've got this kind of all together, I use my fingers and I kind of shape it into a ball in the center here. My bowl is a little bit floury, and that's okay because that's going to prevent the dough from sticking to the sides of the bowl as we're going. And so cover it in plastic wrap, and when we come back, we'll show you how to roll out and press out your English muffins. Our English muffin dough is ready. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we put this kind of messy English muffin dough off to the side to let it rise, covered it with plastic wrap. It has doubled in size. And so the next thing that we need to do is we need to get these English muffins ready to go and fry in a frying pan. And so we're gonna cut them out and we're gonna let them rest a little bit. This is where your cornmeal comes in. I'm gonna take, to give it that signature kind of English muffin outside, and I'm gonna sprinkle half of this on the bottom of just a piece of wax paper or parchment paper baking sheet. We're not actually gonna bake it just makes it a little bit easier so that I can grab them to put in the frying pan and then also put them on the frying pan when we're finished. So I took about half of that, and this is 2 tablespoons. So about a tablespoon on the bottom, and that's what we're gonna set our English muffins on, and then we're gonna sprinkle the rest on top of our English muffins. So I've got that ready to go. I'm gonna take and I'm gonna lightly flour my countertop here with my flour shaker. And I'm just gonna take and this, oh, I love this part. Woof! We got a big old pile of English muffin dough. So I'm gonna take here and I'm gonna sprinkle this side too with a little bit of flour so that I know it's not going to stick to the surface. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna roll this out to about a 1/2 inch thickness. Now when I'm rolling, I'm not gonna bulldozer it. I'm gonna actually be very, very gentle. Start from the center and kind of work my rolling pin away from the center as I gently roll this out. Because this is such a beautiful, soft dough, it applies using very, very little pressure to make this happen. All right, so we've got that. I've got my 4-inch cookie cutter here. Again, this would be like the size of like a cleaned out tuna can. If you take the top and the bottom off, you may use like a large plastic cup would also work for this. Either way that you do it, I kind of like just mess it around in the flour a little bit on the edges so that it doesn't stick. And then the trick to a good English muffin or a biscuit, I think, is all in the dough pop. So instead of twisting this out, which actually when it comes to bake will kind of untwist, you want to just give it a pop and a wiggle. And we're going to lift that English muffin up, which is still just a 1/2 inch thick, and place it right on the cornmeal. We're going to continue to do this with all of those. Pop, wiggle, lift it up there, and set it into the cornmeal. And see how many we can get out of here. I'm for sure gonna get 8, maybe 10 out of this mixture. The trick with this is don't roll it out too thin, otherwise you end up with really, really thin English muffins, and then they'll be hard to open up to put your yummy fillings in. So really kind of stick to that 1/2 inch thickness. If it does get too thin, here's kind of I just kind of like scrunch it back up a little bit and pat it flat so that they're nice and thick enough. And then you can take and give it a pop and lift that out of there. This is not the type of dough that you can re-roll, so as you're popping out your English muffins, you want to get them as close to each other as possible so that you don't waste any of that dough that you made. We're going to put some cornmeal on top of those as well, and then we're going to let them sit for about 10 minutes and rest and just kind of relax here. And then we're going to go to the frying pan and we're going to fry them up. It's time to make the English muffins. So the first thing I did is I've got my pan on medium, low to medium heat, depending on how hot your stove is. And I gave it a quick spray with my non-stick spray right over here. Definitely something I always have in the kitchen ready to go. The other thing that we're gonna do here is I've got my English muffins, and I'm just gonna take and I'm gonna lay them in the pan on that. And I'm gonna do about 4 at a time here. I ended up with 9 English muffins. I probably could have gotten 10 if I would have gone a little bit smaller with my cookie cutter. But for sure, you are definitely gonna get 8 muffins with this. So what we do is we let these cook, and the actual steam inside of the English muffin actually forces it to puff a little bit more as it's baking inside that pan. So or I should say it's frying on your frying pan here. I also have my oven mitt handy in case I gotta pull them off of the heat. And then at about 6 minutes, we're gonna flip these over, and then you're gonna cook them for about 3 to 4 minutes on the other side. So very, very simple. Make the dough, let it rest, cut it out, let it rest, fry them in the pan, and then you just let them cool to room temperature and you enjoy them. If you want to serve them warm, what I've done here with my first batch of 4 that's already ready to go to show you is I've just put them on this baking sheet. As you're making them, you can actually put them on a baking sheet and hold them in a warm oven too if you'd like to. And so now what we do is when we get these ready to go, we're gonna take and we're just gonna open them up, and you can fill them with all of your favorite treats. Cream cheese, jam, or in my case, any time that I have an excuse, I like to put a little Nutella inside of them. So those are our English muffins. Super yummy. Or you can also, like we talked about earlier, you can turn them into Eggs Benedict. The nice thing about these is once they cool to room temperature, you can store them in an airtight, just like Ziploc plastic bag, and they'll last for about a week in your refrigerator. So you can have them for the rest of the week.